Thank you for coming, everybody. So, this is a fun book, and I hope all of you read it. And
who are you?
Thank you, husband. I'm Debra Englander, and I am actually, as of, Lisa, you didn't even know this a couple of weeks ago, associate publisher at Post Hill Press, which is an independent press distributed by Simon & Schuster, one of the larger publishers. And I spent my whole career in books and magazines, and for a long time I was a reporter at Money Magazine, and then moved on to edit business books, and now I acquire books cross-category, which is much more fun than just working on investment books. So it all began, I get submissions from agents who send an email, usually with a proposal attached, wanting to interest me in a book. So in February of 2022, I got an email from Chip McGregor, who's an agent, Lisa's agent, and someone I've bought a couple of books from. And he's very straightforward, which I like, as opposed to many agents who will exaggerate what their authors can do, or will go on and rave endlessly about the books. So he says, I'm wondering if I could run an idea by you. Lisa is a travel reporter for Orbitz and KTLA in Los Angeles, has published more than 2,000 travel articles, and he lists the magazines, and runs a popular blog. She also has been a regular on several network TV shows, been seen a couple of million times on YouTube, and has nearly 1 million fans on TikTok for her travel writing. But she's got a fascinating personal story that I think will appeal to a lot of women who want to reinvent themselves. At 40, she found herself alone after her husband beat her in public while on a trip to Thailand, unsure if she could ever travel by herself, and timid, looking at a huge bucket list of stuff she wanted to get done in her life, but unsure how to go about it. And even though she didn't feel confident, wasn't sure what steps to take, and has a problematic health issue, a degenerative eye condition, Lisa knew she had to remake her life. So she set out a plan for doing that, centered around a list of places she wanted to visit. She has traveled the world, met presidents and celebrities, won awards for her reporting, and most importantly, created a life that is happy and fulfilling and successful, regularly checking things off that bucket list. She now considers herself bravish. Lisa has a proposal and sample chapters ready to go. It's really well done, and I was wondering if I could run it by you for the list at Post Hill. This is a combination travel memoir and inspirational self-help book for women with a fun feel to it. She's also got huge media support for it, and I wanted to see if you'd be willing to take a look. So I did take a look, and about 3 months later, we had a contract. And I knew that Lisa would be an ideal author because she immediately said, oh, I'm writing the book, but I'm still interviewing authors, and proceeded to ask me for the emails for 6 other authors who she interviewed quite successfully. So months go by, she's writing. And I knew she had been working with an editor, which is fine. Many first-time authors do that. So I opened the email, well over 100,000 words, which is not good because that makes for a 400-page book these days, and nobody, unless you're writing a textbook, 400-page books at $30 plus, no good. So I started to read the manuscript, and I did some cutting, but way too much cutting for me unless I could stop acquiring the books and doing everything else and work on this for about 3 weeks. So I sent to Lisa an email. Oh my God. It is hard to cut so much. I'm more than halfway done going through the book. I don't know that I'll get everything cut, so you may still have some whittling when I get it to you. And then I turned it over to Lisa. So she'll tell you the painful things that she had to cut, but essentially, yes, we got it through production. We had a terrible first cover design. That was based on Lisa's suggestions of couldn't we have some sort of a map, and then we had a map and a title, and it was as if we were looking at puzzle pieces that were from 2 disconnected puzzles. But the book is here, and I have to say that yes, she does have another career. I would hire her, and I would recommend her to any of my authors because she's a dynamo publicist. She is relentless about getting the names of media and just calling them and saying, I will be there tomorrow, and here's why you should interview me. And she's been enormously successful. So when people ask me, who is the book for? I'd say, yes, in a way it's primarily a woman's book, but it's really for anyone who aspires to step out of their comfort zone, and maybe isn't courageous enough to have their own bucket list, but certainly can identify with many of her adventures. And I am really the armchair traveler. I am a complete wimp who probably can't even swim, but I still found it enormously entertaining, and I hope all of you will. And with that, before we take questions, I want Lisa to talk about the book.
Yes, and so I actually told Debbie, we were talking about this book, and I think it was you who said relentless. So I said that to someone like, oh, that's the name of your second book. I'm like, I don't know if there is a second book, but I think it would have to be called Relentless, but in a good way. Right? Is that fair?
You want positive.
I like positive. It's like, you know, anyway, what did you want me to talk about? My beautiful book?
Well, when did you decide to write it, and what were, was it hard? What were challenging things when you were writing it?
Was it hard? So you can see Carl laughing in the back. Carl's in the book. Hi, Carl. Thanks for being here from San Francisco. And Carl features early on in the book when I had a lot of challenges. And I mean, living the story was full of challenges. There were things that happened that were ugly, and it was bad enough to live through it, and then deciding to write about it, that seemed like a mistake many times. But when I left my spouse and I came back to America, and as you heard in Chip's proposal letter, I had problems with my eyes. My whole life I've been told that I was clumsy, and that's why I had so many accidents. But in fact, I'm not clumsy. I had a problem with my eyes. And so one of the things that happened as part of my divorce, because I got divorced in Los Angeles, some of you might not know this being in Philadelphia, but we have a lot of kinds of therapy in Los Angeles. I did them all. I don't know they all figured so much in the book, but there was one I did where they have these big squares. They're like a styrofoam, and you get a bat or a tennis racket, and you get to beat it. I was like, oh, I want to do this even when I feel better. This is so fun. But I did vision therapy, and partially was my eye doctor, Dr. Alan Brodney, who helped me work on my eyes. My eyes didn't work together. And once they did, Dr. Brodney said, you need to do some challenges. Like, your eyes work better, you should do something. And I was like, oh, that sounds terrible. And in the end, I decided to do this project where I did 50 challenges before I turned 50, but I never agreed to the project ever. I didn't want to start, and earlier tonight, one of my friends who I met in 1983, we were in Israel together 40 years ago, and I can't mention Israel without saying that it's been such a horrible, tragic, devastating time, and I've been praying every day for the hostages, but I know that as of last night, the IDF has surrounded the main headquarters of Hamas, so I'm very hopeful the hostages will be home soon. But we met in Israel, and now he's a professor here, and he has a book, and it's just so interesting to have all of these people from my life come back together. So one of the friends also from Israel is the part of the very first challenge I did. And I didn't think it was a challenge. She's like, it's something you never would have done. She said, take out your phone and open a list and put number 1. You're starting your project right now. And I was like, I didn't agree to do this project. She's like, just do number 1. So somehow I made it through 50 challenges. In fact, I made it through 80 challenges. And my editor, Anne, helped me pick 50 because we couldn't have 80. That didn't make sense. And we worked on the challenges. And honestly, in some ways, living through things that don't go well, you just, somehow you keep going. But sitting down to write about all of them seemed way, way harder because you have to think about how many bad choices you made and suffer through them again. And there were a lot of times I would sit at my computer and write till I was pretty sure I was going to throw up. And then I lay on the floor for a while thinking about why was I doing this project. But somehow I got through it, and I had a friend who kept asking me why I was doing this project. And I did wonder that many times. It was very helpful for me to write about. It was very cathartic. And I have heard from other people reading the book, some people find it laugh out loud funny, but that is helpful to think about how to make changes and grow. And so I'm very thankful that it's meaningful to other people. It was definitely worth it for me to go through and come out to have, I really can't believe I have a book and I'm in the bookstore at Penn. It's amazing. So exciting. Is that good?
Yeah. So what's been the reaction of family and close friends?
Oh, that's funny. So I had asked my agent Chip, when do you share the book with your family? And he said, well, if you like them, now. And if you don't like them, never make them buy the book when it comes out. I was like, okay, that's very specific. So I gave the book to my parents and my sister, and I really wasn't sure how they were going to take to the book. My mom read the book. She said, this is so great, I'm going to buy it for everybody. Wow, that's very supportive, thank you. And my dad said he liked it, and he felt like he knew me better, but he told a mutual friend it was really TMI. He did not need to read all of that about me. And that was after Debbie cut out a whole lot of stuff.
And what have you gotten the same question as you've been interviewed? Is there one topic that everybody seems to ask you about?
Is there one topic everybody seems to ask me about? People always ask me what was the craziest of the 50 or what was the hardest of the 50. That comes up a lot. And people ask me, why did I get started on this project? Honestly, people ask me really different things. Like I was recently interviewed by Rabbi Address for his show, which is called Jewish Sacred Aging. So he was talking a lot about how people are living longer and some people are turning more to spirituality. So we talked more about, I'm very involved with my temple in Los Angeles, Stephen Wise Temple, and some people have a different kind of connection to me. So, I'm speaking next week in New Orleans at the scuba conference. So a couple of those articles were all about scuba diving. And in fairness, it was very, very hard to teach me to scuba dive because I'd had a near drowning as a child. And every time I was, for scuba diving, one of the skills, it's a little bit different now after COVID, but in scuba diving, we used to practice buddy breathing. You have to give your regulator up. And so sometimes because of the stuff with my eyes, they didn't always get all the steps of the directions. And so when we were scuba diving in class, I would give my regulator away and bolt to the surface because I never quite got the instruction, take a breath, then give it away. So they're like, why is this so hard for you? I'm like, I don't know, I'm always out of air. And they're like, I think there's a step that you're missing. So that was, not in hindsight, it makes sense. All the places where I had terrible problems or where sometimes I would call myself a derailed train, but my friend told me I should say I just switched gears. That sometimes those reasons that things were so hard for me were because of the problem I had with my eyes. And when I was going to vision therapy, I said to my mom, I'm like, why did you not ever take me to the doctor? And she said, let me think. Let's see. You got straight A's and you never complained about anything. What doctor should I have taken you to? I was like, well, that does seem reasonable. But, we just attributed to, I think that in the 70s, growing up as a girl in Los Angeles, I was a little bit clumsy. I read all the time. I think it's different now, the way that soccer has gone across the United States, that we expect girls to participate as much in sports. And some kids aren't that sporty. So I thought I wasn't sporty, but actually I'm quite sporty.
Talk a little bit about your time working for the cruise ship line. Because that I found actually, fun. Even though we had to take out some of the details that were just a little too racy. Well, Lisa says, well, can I change all the names of various friends? And I'm like, you could, but since there are only 5 people, they're all going to know who they are, and do you really have to tell this story?
So sometimes when I get interviewed, Especially, I've been interviewed a bunch of times on television. It's daytime TV, and so once someone asked me about cruise ship, and I worked on Club Med before I worked on a cruise ship, and we called Club Med Club Bed. And so I said, the lady said, what was it like and working, in travel? And I said, well, at night there was a lot of mingling. And so at the end of the interview, she said to me, I really appreciated your PG response. And I was like, okay. So now all the time when people ask me, I say that there was a lot of mingling. And so I did work for Princess Cruises, Royal Caribbean International, and Renaissance Cruises. And I started at Club Med, and altogether I was gone about 7 years. So some of you could imagine it like this. I went to private all-girls school in Los Angeles. Then I came here to Penn. Then I went to medical school and I dropped out, and I went to work for Club Med, and my parents were very proud. That went over great. So I was at Club Med. I worked at Copper Mountain in Colorado, and then in Eleuthera in the Bahamas. And one of the reasons they hired me for Copper Mountain, I had a master's in education, and I worked in the kids program, but I was a skier. So during the day, everybody works in their service. I worked in the kids program. We skied with the ski instructors. But at night, everybody's in the show. And I worked only in family villages because they don't have a kids program in the singles village, although they could have one, but that's a different show. It'd be a different book. And anyway, on the cruise ships and at Club Med, I describe it as it's like living in a college dorm, but nobody has any homework. So at night, what are you supposed to do? So there was mingling. And one story, I don't think this one made it in the book, but maybe it did. I went at Club Med, if you completed 2 villages, so that was 4 to 6 months each, you could have as a present from Club Med, you could go to any village in the world for 2 weeks as a guest. You had to fly yourself there, but everything else was free. And at Club Med, everything was included anyway. So I went scuba diving. And in that village was a singles village, and there was a lot of mingling day and night. And one of the guys that I met was so bored of how easy it was to mingle. He was mingling through the alphabet. So when I met him, he was on E. So like the week before, he had slept with a girl whose name started with D, and was only going to sleep with someone if their name started with E. So obviously very deep, meaningful connections. Yeah, it was, this is before they had The Bachelor. People had to entertain themselves at night. And so, but we didn't get to put everything in the book. My agent told me, it's okay if you cut stuff out, you could sell it off as other articles.
Have you?
I have sold a lot of articles, actually. Thank you for asking. I am my very first byline in Travel and Leisure.
Nice. What's the article?
That is such a good question. So on my website, lisaniver.com/press, it has all the articles and all the TV segments. It's good. Why? I don't know the name of that article, but that's a reasonable question. And then,
what is it about?
oh yeah, I wrote it. But the article, I know that. The article's about the book and traveling. It's called something like How After My Divorce I Set Myself Free, or all the articles have basically the same name, just a little bit different. But and then Condé Nast Traveler put my book on a list, top 10 books to read for the fall. And Forbes, I was in a Forbes article that was best new nonfiction. And Forbes, Condé Nast Traveler. Oh, I got interviewed in Bloomberg and Business Insider both. And I just sold a story to Wired about reverse mentoring, because when I first learned to do YouTube, Debbie mentioned I have over 2 million views on YouTube. But when I first started on YouTube, I had a lesson. I was teaching school at the time in Los Angeles, and I taught kindergarten through 6th grade science. And one day in class, I said to my students, my 5th graders, I have no idea why that class on that day. I said, I just got back from Taiwan and I took all this video, but I don't know how to make a movie. And so this little girl, Hannah, who's actually the niece of someone I went to Penn with, he went to high school in LA and we both came to Penn, and then it just happened, Hannah, his niece, was in that class, and anyway. So Hannah said to me, you know what, Miss Niver, I'm going to stay in at recess today, and I'm going to teach you iMovie. And so I had the absolute best 5.5-minute lesson to learn how to make a movie. And so she taught me iMovie, and then I started studying. I read some books, and I took more classes. The Apple Store has classes, so I took a class at the Apple Store, and I started making movies, and I grew my YouTube channel. And then over time, with COVID, I wasn't traveling, and my YouTube channel was kind of stagnant, and my agentship had this class about TikTok, and that you should be on TikTok. And I was like, oh, I do not want to go on TikTok. TikToks for teenagers. So he had this workshop, and the whole thing was about every author on the workshop had a complaint. One guy said, I'm too old. One guy said, I'm too ugly. One guy said, I don't know how to make videos. And I was like, I'm willing to make videos, but I don't want to turn my camera, because YouTube is this way and TikTok is this way. And I was like, it's really hard. The first thing your agent asks you to do, it's not a really good look to be like, nope, I'm out, not doing that. So the challenge of the workshop was to make 5 TikToks a day for 30 days, 150 TikToks. And I was like, that sounds terrible. So I happened to be in Las Vegas at a scuba conference, the same one I'm going to next week. I don't know why scuba conference is in Las Vegas and New Orleans. It doesn't make sense to me either, but it is. So I'm at the scuba conference in Las Vegas, and I agreed to one day. I will do 5 videos, that's it. So I go to the scuba conference, and I tell people, because I know a lot of people, I'm like, I'm starting on TikTok, can I interview you? And everyone's like, yeah, I don't care. So I make 5 TikToks, and the next day I have 1,200 views. I was like, wow, that seems better than it's not just me and my mom. I don't have 5 views. So I agree to another day. I keep going and going and going. Anyway, the way that I learned iMovie, right, I interviewed, a 5th grader helped me. So when I had to join TikTok, I interviewed my college roommate's 12-year-old. I called her up and I was like, hey, can you help me out? I have to join TikTok for my book. She said, listen, Lisa, you need to be more fun. Don't be so professional. I'm like, okay. And her other suggestion, she had a lot of suggestions. That's all in this story I sold to Wired about Hannah and this other 2 12-year-olds that changed my digital career. Her main advice was, the robots are smarter than you. Let them edit. And I was like, that seems very wise beyond your years. So I do mostly let the TikTok robots edit, but sometimes it aggravates me and I change stuff and those videos don't do very well. So mostly I try to channel this 12-year-old and but anyway, now because of TikTok, that reinvigorated my YouTube, and that's how I got to 2 million views. I had stopped really making videos, and then TikTok, and it's weird because writing the book I didn't think would get me. TikTok would help my YouTube, but that's what happens. It's a mosaic.
What did Chip tell you about the publishing process? Or what did you know? And is it what you expected, different? And I ask because there's a big difference. Most authors think of themselves as, I'm a writer, I've completed a book. But once you turn your book into production, or even while you're writing and you have to start thinking about marketing, and there's usually kind of an author questionnaire that the publisher gives authors of like, okay, we're 6 months out, the book's going to be available for sale online. What do have you thought about who you're going to promote to get pre-sales? And then really from shortly before pub date until after, and this is true whether you self-publish or you have a traditional publisher, is then you have to focus, you're really an author, and there's a whole business to publishing. And maybe years ago you could kind of, oh, the publisher's going to do that. But these days, business is too competitive, and in fact, it takes a village, and the author is partnering with a publisher. So I'm sort of curious whether you had a certain preconceived notion of, oh, I've got a publisher, this is what's going to happen, and then in reality, what did you think of the process?
The process. Well, there are lots of authors here in the room who've been very fortunate to have books, and I think that one of the things that my agent Chip said that I took a lot of notes about was, he said, don't wait for the publisher to promote your book. Because I asked him, what are the mistakes and what should I do? And he said, don't wait for someone else to care about your book. And it was fortunate for me that I have 3 websites. I have the YouTube channel. I had tons of social media. Last December, I actually started a podcast because no one was doing that, so I thought that would be a good idea. And I think the publicity part was the most familiar for me. Like, I've been promoting my own website and my own social media and my own videos. The editing part and the publishing part and not knowing like how much to do or how much to write or how much to take out, that was a harder part. This part has been much more fun. The promoting, and I like being on TV, that's very fun. And it's interesting for me how all the pieces fit together. Like I can interview someone on my podcast that maybe wouldn't normally even necessarily write me back if I emailed them. Like my podcast is up for 3 awards. The award ceremony is December 3rd. And so I'm nominated as podcast host or radio anchor. It's the same category. So there's 5 finalists. This is the National the National Arts and Entertainment Journalism Awards. National Arts and Entertainment Journalism. So I'm up for podcast host. So in my 5 finalists, one of them is Jon Stewart. I'm pretty sure we all know who's winning, right? Okay, that's John's category, but at least I'm nominated. And then one of the other categories, I'm nominated for an interview I did with Andrew McCarthy. Now, Andrew McCarthy and I speak in the same circuit for the Travel and Adventure Show, and I've met him twice. I spoke in 4 cities last year, and I think he spoke in 4 cities, but only had 2 cities the same. I don't have his email address. He wouldn't email me back, but his PR team for his book, Walking with Sam, was willing to give me the interview. So just funny, like what you can make happen. So because I interviewed him, that's up for an award. But I mean, is it because of me? I think it's pretty much because of him. And then my 3rd one is is a National Geographic new host. So I interviewed him. I also know from the Travel and Adventure Show. But I think the hardest thing for me with the book was it was hard to write about all of those things from my life. And then my friend Mo, who was here earlier, was like, "Are we old enough to have a memoir?" I'm like, "I guess we are. We're old."
Can I ask one question or 2? I'm curious of the destinations that you were in. Like, are there places you've gone back to many times, or is it always part of it's going somewhere new and kind of challenging yourself that way?
So I do both. I love to go back to the same place, and one of the things for me is I have a lot of place memory, like something that happened, then I feel it again, going back to the place. Like some people, I traveled a lot with my spouse, and so we weren't home in one place. A lot of people break up and like, oh, I can't go back to that same restaurant, I have bad memories. For me, it's the Fiji airport. I walked through the Fiji airport and I just remember we had this terrible fight, and it's like a weird place memory. But Puerto Rico is in my Bloomberg article, and in the article it talks about that I was there. I worked on the cruise ship. I was on the Rhapsody of the Seas. San Juan, Old San Juan was my home port, so we were there every week. And then I filmed there with Orbitz, and that was when I was deciding to get divorced. I had left my spouse, but I didn't have a lawyer yet, but I took my name back on that trip. And then I was just there, and I got to interview Dr. Richard Murphy on World Environment Day. He's worked 50 years with the Cousteau Society. And so just amazing, like I love it there, and we were there together, and there was so much, actually almost made her have heat stroke because we walked. That was a different trip though. That was when the District Tree Mobile opened, and so we were there for the grand opening. It was really hot, and I'm like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, it'll be fine. It was not fine. But no, look at her, she's still mad. But so Puerto Rico is somewhere I've been over and over again. Park City, I go all the time. I was just there for the grand opening of the National Ability Center. They help athletes who need accommodations. I've skied with someone who was blind. I skied with a wounded warrior. I've skied there with my college friend Carl. And then I love to go new places. I'm very, very in search of, the book's subtitle has 6 continents. I would like to go to Antarctica. So hopefully that will happen. I'm not sure exactly what's happening next, but someone asked me, would I lead a travel group? It's like, I will lead a travel group to Antarctica. And I have funny places that I've never been. Somehow I've never been to Sedona. I've never been to Austin or Atlanta. But I have been to Mongolia and Morocco. So, I have places to fill in. So, and during COVID, one of my friends from the cruise ships, she and her kids spent a year in Los Angeles. And so she and her husband's a ship's captain now. The three of us have traveled all around the world. We lived on the ship. We traveled 100%. And their daughter, who was 15 at the time, really wanted to go to Death Valley. Why do you want to go to Death Valley? She said, I saw it on TikTok. I'm like, of course you did. So we agreed to go to Death Valley. And once we agreed, the kids found out that neither Julie or I had ever been there. We both grew up in California. And they just couldn't stop laughing. They're like, you guys have been everywhere and you've never been to Death Valley? And so the second road trip we took was to Joshua Tree because we'd never been there either. But sometimes you don't make use of the places close to you. So, but yeah, what, do you have a trip you want to invite me on? I'm ready.
I was going to see if you had any tips on, I'm fascinated with Albania.
Oh.
I want to go there.
I have not been there.
Okay.
But I think maybe my podcast now is listened to in 40 countries on 6 continents. So I don't think I have Albania on the podcast, and I've not been there yet. But
I keep hearing good things. It's like everyone I talk to has something. It's weird. It's in
yeah, that means you're meant to go there.
Yes.
Questions? Anybody?
What was the nature of the challenges? Was it mostly athletic, or you talked about the 80 different challenges?
Yes, they were a big variety. So some of them were kind of taking back things that were accidents I'd had as a child. So I had a quite serious accident bike riding as a child, in the 70s. I was with a group of teens at a family camp, and my bike locked onto someone else's bike. That's the last thing I remember, was my front wheel locked. The next thing I remember was lying on the ground. But apparently my bike and I did a flip, and I landed on my head, and I was unconscious. And when I opened my eyes, everyone in the group was standing around me. And the counselor said, get back on your bike. We're going to ride back to camp. And I was like, okay. That's not exactly what we do with head injuries now. It's a little bit different. And, we didn't have helmet or anything. But the funniest thing about that story is we went to my parents took me to the emergency room. My dad is a dentist. And so, of course, it had sandbags on either side of my head, and it was very uncomfortable. And my dad moved them. And Mom was like, you can't move those. I was like, she rode her own bike back. She's probably fine. So, and then the technician's like, sir, you can't do that. And then, I don't know, my dad went away and he came back and he's walking in the room and someone's following him again. Sir, I need that. He's like, just a minute, I need to show this to her. And he brought me the x-ray of my head and he's like, these are your wisdom teeth. And then he says, now you can have the x-ray back. So one of my challenges, I went mountain biking, and I went in North Star Lake Tahoe, which I'm happy to ski in Lake Tahoe, but I was not that excited about the bike riding. I had done a women's ski clinic, and they invited me back to go to this thing called Pumps and Pedals. It was a women's bike weekend, and I was like, oh no, I'm never coming to that. And the woman, the PR person, was like, we really want you to come. I'm like, that is never happening. She said, well, would there be a way that you would come? I said, maybe if you got me a private lesson with a teacher that doesn't mind crying, I might come. And I didn't think there would actually be crying. Anyway, she said she would go with me, and she was also scared. So, in fact, not only was there crying, I had 2 instructors, because the first instructor, she told me and my friend, you need to do these 3 skills before you went up the mountain. And I could not get them. And so we took a break, and the owner came out. His name was Shep, and Shep's like, we're going up the mountain. I'm like, we're not going up the mountain. She said, I need 3 skills. I didn't even get skill number 1. I'm failing. No. He's like, get on your bike. Anyway, we went, and obviously I lived. And it was even a tiny bit fun. Some of them were new places. Some of them were new things. I went scuba diving with the bull sharks. That was a class I took. That was scary, but I liked it. And
in a cage, or?
Oh no, this is not cage diving. No, bull sharks you don't use a cage for bull sharks. The bull sharks are known, supposedly one of the top 3 most dangerous sharks. But these were pregnant females, and they're really very disinterested. The problem in that area is some people take the boat out and chum and feed, and so it's making the animals aware that humans might be a food source. Not that we are a food source, but that we carry a food source. And so it's a problem in a lot of places. There's a lot of challenges with scuba right now. It's a very big problem with the lionfish, the invasive species. I was recently in Destin, Florida. I was a judge for the lionfish competition. So one of the things that we're training people to do.
Talent competition?
It's a talent competition for the chefs. So each restaurant prepares the lionfish a different way. And so it is. Carl knows I'm a very picky eater, but I really like lionfish. And so I did eat the lionfish, so that was my first time being a judge and my first time going fishing. But I decided it's way more fun to visit the fish underwater. No more fishing for me. But I'm going, this month I'm invited to be a judge. I'm a judge for the Business Travel Awards. So I'm hoping that means someone's gonna invite me to be a business traveler soon. Like business class airlines.
What's involved in being a judge for the Business Traveler Award?
What's what?
What's involved in being a judge for the Business Traveler Awards? Are you visiting hotels that serve business travelers and trying to who's up for those awards?
Yes, that's part of what I did. So all of the judges we selected on a variety of categories, like the top airlines, the top hotel brands, the best place for, I think it was like 20 categories. So we put that out and they sorted through it, and then people were voting. Mm-hmm. And then the award ceremony is in Miami the end of this month, right after Thanksgiving.
So you're telling me I have to read, I have to buy coming out in a magazine, coming out in
fact, I'm sure it will be on my website. So if you go to We Said Go Travel,
yeah,
or lisaniver.com, I put everything on my website. And I can 100% guarantee there will be a video. Yes, now that I'm over 2 million views, I'm not so worried anymore about getting to 2 million views, because we put on my bio that I had 2 million views, so I was scurrying a little bit. We had to get there. But one of my friends told me that 1,900,000 was pretty close. It could count for 2 million. Like, most people, and in fact, the highest number of videos on YouTube, or the most common number of views on YouTube for a video is 0. Most videos have no views, or well under 100. I was kind of like books. There's only 5% of books sell more than 1,000 copies in the first year. Is that right?
Number may be even lower, but we don't want to discourage writers. So
We don't want to discourage writers. You should keep writing. But it's not. It's
a tough business.
It's a tough business, as you know.
In part because people can't self-publish, so more and more books are published every year. And I think people are just accustomed to getting information in bite-sized segments. So a survey recently, and it was of younger people, but to me it was a very low number. It was something like they admitted to purchasing like 4 books a year. And they did go to the library and read some others, but to me 4 seemed like an extraordinarily low number of books. And I have to say that every Thursday you can look at sales. So it meant, whether it was bought online or at a bookstore, sales for the following week ending Sunday. So particularly the first 2 weeks the book is out, you're looking for very robust sales. And most authors will say, well, I know there were a lot of pre-orders, like, my whole extended family, my entire, office bought books. And sometimes I have to say, clearly those people did not buy books, because I'm looking at the number 20. And I'd say a couple of times a month on a Thursday, someone will write me back and say, oh, Deb, did you leave off a 0? When I give them their sales numbers, because it can be extraordinarily low. And we just expect it And it's just print sales that we'll look at initially, and then obviously Kindle sales will come through. And what I always tell authors is, yes, we'd love to have a robust launch, but more importantly is that the book sells forever and ever. So you could have, some weeks it might be steady, fairly modest number, but then you get some media hit or you're speaking. So I had a book recently that is sold modestly. It's a book about AI. And the author has also purchased books because she's doing a lot of speaking. But 1 week, out of the blue, it was like our third best-selling book with nearly 1,000 copies. And I don't know, that could have been a couple of large bulk orders through accounts, but it was like, well, that's fine, we'll take it. Some of the larger publishers really count on their bestsellers to support the rest of the list. So if you have a Stephen King or Britney Spears selling, for however long their new books will sell, that supports a whole lot of other first-time books that may sell in that, less than 1,000 copy range. But the numbers have definitely come down. So if a couple of years ago I could say, okay, this is my estimate for first year sales, let's say for some investment book, and we knew where the book would get coverage and the kinds of places it would be stocked. Now when I publish a book and I'm asked, okay, what's your estimate? I'm like, beats the heck out of me. I don't, because all bets are off. Books that you think will do really well, or when an author is on a national show and you're convinced, well, how many people are watching the Today Show? So, gee, you'd expect this to sell 1,000 books or something, and then no, like it sold 10. So it is hard. And it is, as Lisa will tell you, her publicist actually left the company shortly after she started working on Lisa's book. And in fact, the press kit was fine, and she sent out pitches and got no responses. And frankly, it's not just my company, but most publicists are working on 10 books at a given time. So they're essentially, they may have a terrific press list and they could be targeting all the people, but essentially they're sending out an email. And maybe they're making a couple of calls, or maybe if someone contacts them about booking another author, they might say, oh, by the way, I know you're interested in this. I happen to have another author. Would you like to have this author on? But I think authors, and I wish it was different, but I think authors don't realize that the publicists are generally being reactive. They're not being proactive. But here is author who doesn't know how to be reactive and is supremely proactive, which is, well, I don't know anyone there, but I suspect you called a couple of places and it's like, oh, well, can you tell me, that you kind of got passed from person to person, or you said, well, I'm looking for the producer who's booking people for this show.
Yep. Well, but even for Penn, my talk was in the Penn Women's Center News and the Penn Women's Studies News and on the student life calendar, and the bookstore put it up, and Wharton magazine put something, and Penn Gazette put something, so that was quite a large number of contacts.
And we, as speaking for the publisher, hope that, even though people might not have come here, that seeing the cover and hearing about the book will resonate, and so that then they will go out and buy the book.
Right, or I was in Philadelphia Magazine, which some people read. There were 79 things to do this weekend in Philadelphia, and it makes people show up. And I was on NBC 10 with Sheila Watko today, and that I actually wasn't sure. I don't know what is going to hit, and I think one of the things that some people do in one of my writing groups, people know. They'll be like, I pitched 100 agents, or I've pitched this story X number of times. And I'm like, oh, I definitely don't keep track of that. Mm-hmm. They'll be like, I don't stop till I've had this many no's. I'm like, no, I just keep going.
But you didn't land your agent immediately.
No, I did not.
So we'll talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
So that, just so you know,
I did not.
some publishers will accept books directly, manuscripts directly from authors, but most publishers will only accept submissions from a literary agent. So a literary agent is kind of the middle person between authors and publishers. And part of it is that they'll work on the pitch, they'll work on the proposal, but more importantly, they know editors at hundreds of companies, and they're in touch with the editors, so they know what they're looking for. So having an agent is really advantageous, and the agent becomes the author's advocate. From negotiating the deal to, if the cover is terrible, the agent will intercede. And so I think, I will buy books both from agents and from authors, but I think agents can be tremendously helpful.
Yes. I went on a few different workshops about how do you find an agent, and how do you find a developmental editor, and how do you find everything. I'm a teacher and I love school, and so I went to lots of classes and I read lots of books, and I did what everyone says, that people say, you get Publishers Marketplace, which is only $25 a month, so it's not a huge investment, and then you have to find people that are interested in what your book is about, because it has to be a match. Unfortunately, everything's like dating, like, someone really wanted to be my agent, except they don't work in nonfiction. So she kept asking me, couldn't I write this book as fiction? I was like, but it's real. Why would I write fiction? And it turned out the reason was because that's what she was good at selling. She wanted to work with me. And then I had another agent that seemed interested in me, and I took a call, and she's like, I really like your voice. I'm like, okay. And then she says, but I really don't like this book. Okay. And she's like, let's have another call, and let's each bring 10 other ideas of what book you could write. I was like, yeah, that is a hard pass. I'm like, we're not doing that. I thought you had a chance, but you're not coming around. But yeah, I wrote to a lot of agents, and I wrote, I submitted a lot. That I did keep track of, because you're allowed to go back every certain amount of time, and mostly you're not supposed to submit to a second agent at the same company. And that's why I kept track, because I kept finding the same one. I'd be like, I already wrote to you. You kind of have to wait for them to say no to go to the next one in the same agency. But when I first talked to Chip, in fairness, I did not think I would have a man agent for this book. I thought that the champion for my book would be a woman agent. And it turned out that Chip really believed in my book. And he found Debbie and Post Hill Press, Debbie was from the very first call we had. Debbie was like, I really love your book. I'm super interested. And we had this Penn connection that we both went to Penn. And then I just kept writing and too much writing, but then we fixed it.
How did you get to Chip? Do you remember?
Someone in my writing group said, I had been networking with everybody I knew, and basically every person that I ever met in my life, I called and said, do you happen to know anyone that might know someone that knows an agent? And so someone in my writing group knew him.
Why don't you read a section?
You want me to read a section?
Read a couple pages?
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
before you
Yes,
leave?
you can ask a lot of questions.
I'd like to know what advice you have for someone who wants to reboot their life, having been through the dark places, faced a lot of obstacles and challenges, and come out with flying colors on the other side.
Thank you.
What is your takeaway and your message for other women who would want to do something similar, or change something up, or have a third act, or
Thank you.
maybe struggling?
My advice is to start very small. And I always tell people, people say to me, how do I start a website? And a lot of times people's ideas are they're gonna hire a logo designer and this and that, and they're gonna pay all this money. And I'm like, you don't even know if you like it. So I always tell them, start small and for free. And I think the same thing about restarting your life. one of the things, I got to interview Dr. Lisa Niver on my podcast, and she's a neuroscientist, and she has many books. And one of the things she said is your brain is ready for new things, but you have to help it. So she said when you drive home, most people drive home or commute on the train the exact same way. And she said drive on a different street. Could change your whole life. Because it helps your brain, it activates different pathways. It's not that hard. It's not a big investment. It's not like you're gonna quit your job and go traveling for a year. So you just drive on a different street and then you're like, oh, I see that restaurant. I always want to try Vietnamese food. And then maybe you like Vietnamese food. And then maybe you move to Vietnam, but not on the first day. So I think that's the best advice, is to start very small. And even my challenges started very, very small. But I'd say the other thing about starting over is I always say find a trusted friend. So in scuba diving, we never dive without a buddy. And when we're trying to change things, I think it's really helpful to have someone that you can call and say, is this me? Am I crazy? Should I try this? What do you think about that? And for me, the buddy goes with you. Like I never, ever, ever, ever would have done mountain biking if my friend hadn't have said she would go with me. And a follow-up question, you want to talk about what it was like working on this book with me?
It was a total joy. I mean, I think that for any author, memoir is hard. And I told you this when we met, because I met Lisa, and I worked for a publisher in New York for many years. I worked for Doubleday at Random House. And memoir, you have to be willing to get raw and get real and go to the dark places. And as editors, you know this, we sometimes end up a little bit like lawyer, therapist, friend, like counselor, confessor, like all sorts of things, because we're helping people really dig in and we ask questions. That's part of our job, is to push and guide and say, you have to talk about this. And when someone has a lot of challenges in their life, that can be tough. It's tough to, even things are tough to talk about are even harder to write about. So, there was a lot of that, but that's what that's what a developmental editor does. You're kind of like a coach and be like, no, this is really good, you should keep going. No, this is really funny. I mean, fortunately, the thing that I loved about Lisa's book is that you are funny.
Right.
Thank you.
And that was refreshing for me. I love humor. I love people who can be funny, even when the subject matter is hard. It's hard to sustain that in writing, and yet you do. And so even though, the book does have some really challenging things and hard things that happen to you, it is a total joy to read, and is a total joy to work on. And you will laugh, even, when things are really hard, things are happening. But that's a gift, and that's what I think set you apart from a lot of other writers. Especially, we've had some heavy times in recent years, all of us. It's been a very heavy phase of life, and working with Lisa, I was just like, oh, thank goodness, like something we can just smile about.
Thank you, Anne.
Even now, so.
But that was, honestly, and even finding Anne, when we first met, one of the things she asked me is, what other travel memoir do you like? And it turns out one of the memoirs that I really like the most, which is Getting Stoned with the Savages, and I can't think of the title of it.
Sex Lives of Cannibals.
Sex Lives of Cannibals. I loved his book, and I mentioned that, and it's about Vanuatu. And she was like, do you remember at the end of the book when he talks about, how the book got finished? I'm like, no, I don't really remember. She says, do you remember when he says, and my editor was finishing my book in labor and delivery? She said, that was me. And I was like, oh, I think that when things like that happen, I always figure I'm in the right place. That's the person I'm supposed to work with. So there was a lot of that. And I mean, in fairness, you asked me, like, how did I get through this book and how did I find Chip? A lot of it has been that I have been very fortunate that a lot of people have loved and supported it and cared about me for such a long time. I mean, Allison's mom, I wouldn't have been a writer without her. And Ellie was here when I was at Penn, and my goodness, we had a lot of conversations. There's a lot of stories. Basically, everyone has a story about me crying, but it's true. I did cry a lot, but I still made it.
And you're funny about it.
And you're funny about it.
the tears come with laughter.
Yes, which we all need.
We do.
That's good.
Oh, Ellie.
What would be, sort of along your line of what would be your advice, or what would be your suggestion, or what is your formula at those points when you're really at, am I brave enough? What is it that you summon up, or what comes to you that makes you go ahead and be brave?
So that's such a good question, because I would say that I'm not brave, because basically every time something came up, I rejected it. Like when they invited me to go mountain biking, I was like, nope, not gonna happen. And then my friend agreed to go with me, then I could do it. And so I think the thing that for me has helped is I never felt alone, that I could always find someone to bring along with me, that it was even, you know, walking in Puerto Rico when I almost had a heat stroke. I didn't do that by myself. And or when Carl and I once went on an expedition with another friend in Park City, we had this idea. And sometimes it really is related to my eyes. I blame everything on that. I don't understand all the instructions, and I pretend that I do. And so I explained that we were going snowmobiling and skiing. The snowmobile was going to take us up the mountain, and we would ski down, and the snowmobile would take us back up. That was not true. We took a van for 45 minutes outside of Park City. Then we took the snowmobiles for 45 minutes to a mountain, and then it's called alpine trekking. We put basically carpet on the bottom of our skis, and we hiked up this mountain. I cried the whole time, and then we skied down, and I did love it, but I would have definitely given up. Carl was like, why don't you drive the snowmobile? I'm like, I can't drive a snowmobile. Carl drives a motorcycle. I'm like, you drive a snowmobile. He's, I'll sit behind you. You'll be fine. I'm like, I cannot do it. He's like, I believe in you. So even, that was after the 50 things. Still, I would say no to stuff. But Carl was like, I'm not driving. Right? And then by the end, Heather was crying because it was really hard. And it was funny. Both of them have kids at the time who were in college. And like, this would be so much fun for our kids. We're never doing this again. You never get to plan anything ever again. But we lived. I made a good video. But I would mostly say now I'm not so quick to say no to everything. Like I noticed recently, I went last month for my birthday, my sister and I did a doors off helicopter ride in New York. And when that got offered to me, I was like, oh yeah, I want to do that. But of course my 50th challenge was skydiving, and I've climbed a bunch of towers, like the CN Tower in Toronto, and then there's one in New York called the Edgewalk or City Climb. I forget, all the names are kind of similar. And I did all of those, and so the doors off helicopter, I was like, oh, you don't have to jump out, no problem. They're like, aren't you scared the doors are off? I'm like, do we stay inside? I'm good. And they're like, oh, you can put your feet out. And someone's like, you put your feet out? I'm like, yes, I put my feet out, but my whole body stayed inside. It wasn't that bad. It was actually hard to get your feet back in. I had to bring my feet in because the wind shear on the helicopter. But I think for me, I'm willing to not do it. Like with the 50 challenges, I really never agreed to do 50. I was like, maybe I'll do one more, maybe I won't. I was quitting all the time. I wish, like, you know, in the movies when someone's in the jail cell and they put the hashtags every day they're in jail. I wish I had that for every time I quit the challenges, and then a separate whole room of every time I quit this book. I used to call Anne. I'm like, I think that I sound like a dumbass. She goes, no, you sound vulnerable. I'm like, is that another word for stupid? She's like, no, you seem very relatable. I'm like, again, I think that's a synonym for not good. I'm like, I think everyone's going to be laughing at me. She's like, no, they'll be laughing with you. I'm like, So yeah, I quit a lot of times. But I learned something after I wrote the whole book. Would have been way more helpful. It said a phrase, I put it on my desk. It says, rest, not quit. Oh, is that an option?
Do you have a director's cut for your book that was originally written about the cuts that you made?
Well, the problem with the original version is we didn't change the names. So
But
apart from that, oh yeah, I have a file with the page count on it, because Debbie was like, what? This book's never gonna happen. We need to make some changes. But I was worried when we cut it, like, how would it stand together? Would it still make sense? Was too much missing? But We don't miss it because you don't know it was there. But again, we could do a.
I mean, the way you describe it, it sounds like that may be some of the most interesting stuff.
Well, I mean, I think it's still pretty good. It's still a good book. But I have one friend that from high school that was reading my book on the plane. And so she kept messaging me. It didn't come through till the end. But every time she got to a certain section, she would message me. She's like, I'm laughing out loud about this. So, you know, it depends.
I'm sorry we have to go, but
Bye.
can I take 2 books?
Yes, please.
I can get them downstairs?
Yes.
You can get them downstairs, but
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Are they signed?
they're not signed. I could sign before you go.
We can take
But take a pause.
Pause,
Yeah,
yes.
definitely sign them.
Definitely sign them.
You've got the special pen.
Oh, please. I have a deep passion for stickers and markers. I was a preschool teacher too. What's your name?
My name's Val.
Val? I have no idea what time it is.
It's 6:34.
Okay. Thank you, Val. And what about this one?
Michelle?
Michelle, do you have 2 L's?
I do.
It's a very important Michelle question.
Your stint on the East Coast.
Thank you. We're going tomorrow night to the Living Beyond Breast Cancer Gala.
Is that here in Philly?
It is at the Lowe's. Thank you. Enjoy. I hope you take some steps. You can message me on social media and tell me about your challenges.
I'm not on TikTok, but maybe you can inspire me.
I
To find a 12-year-old and show me how to use it.
I post on 7 platforms. Don't worry.
Oh
You
my
can be
gosh,
on a
there's one
different
for
one.
everybody. Thank you.
Oh,
This is
apparently.
serious, but so see if it's okay first.
Oh, no, don't make me read that.
Okay. Then you choose, then you just choose something else.
I don't like to read about Fred. How about I just tell a story, or you want me to read it?
I want you to get a flavor, a sense of the book.
Hmm.
Can I bookmark a question when you're done?
Ask me a
I
question
wanted
so
to
I can
ask you a
think.
question the whole time.
Ask me.
No, read, I'll ask you a question.
This is. Okay, this is funny. I just turned to the page, but I like this story. So recently I was in Park City, I said, for the opening of the National Ability Center. And I grew up skiing there, and we say that my dad would rather ski than breathe. So a few months later, my parents went skiing in Park City. And when they returned to Los Angeles, my mother said, you know, your art is as good or better as everything they sell in the gallery on Main Street. Why don't you call them and sell your art there? I thought to myself, like it's that easy. Actually, what I said to her was, Mom, that's ridiculous. The next day, I sent an email to the gallery with links to my Simply Ceramics social media pages. 2 weeks later, I sent a second email and called to speak with someone. The person in the gallery was friendly and gave me a different email to use. This time, someone emailed me back and told me to call the owner of the gallery, who is the main ceramic artist. I spoke to him on the phone the next day, and he offered, the next time you're in town, bring me some of your art to look at. They normally carried only local artists, but since I'd been coming to Park City for decades, he agreed to consider me. I was floored. Maybe it was that easy. 1 month later, my parents were headed back to Park City for skiing, and I was going with them. I took 2 bags full of my art, and my parents also brought some of my ceramics for me in their bags. I didn't pack it as well as I thought, and several pieces were broken when we arrived. I tried not to be too upset. I could make more, and still had plenty to bring to the gallery owner's studio. I took an Uber to the address he'd given me, but when I knocked on the door, no one answered. I took deep breaths. I had come all the way here with all of these pieces. I tried to remember the instructions. I walked around and found another door on the other side, which was his studio. At first, it didn't seem like anyone was there either. I called his phone. Nothing. I was stumped. We had a meeting time. This was the address. It looked like an art studio. I waited a bit longer, and then he appeared. I took all of my art out of the bags, and he looked everything over. He suggested I stop signing my pieces on the bottom with a year. If your piece is on the shelf in the store with a date from several years ago, people will think, why hasn't anyone bought this, and not pick it. He talked to me about choosing a few styles and making them consistently. We discussed pricing, and he told me which pieces of mine he liked. In the end, he took more than half of what I brought, and I was thrilled. I couldn't believe I was going to be in his gallery on Main Street. This was something I never imagined could happen. On the first day, my art was on the shelves in Park City. 2 of my college friends flew in to ski with me, and we had a photo shoot in the gallery with my pieces in the background. While we were there, a gentleman bought one of my pieces. The woman at the counter said to him, "Would you like to meet the artist? She's here in the gallery." We took photos together, and I was smiling so much, my face started to hurt. I think it's funny. Well, first of all, I love that I read that story and Carl's in it. But that is every single one of my challenges. I thought that I had a meeting with him. I couldn't find him. I wanted to give up. But I didn't give up. I thought about the directions. I mean, I think all 50 of the challenges, I mean, there's a few challenges that I went to new countries because one of my friends said, how many countries have you been to? He said, what if part of your 50 challenges could be you went to your 100th country? So I had to start looking for landlocked countries because I've worked on the cruise ship so long. I've been pretty much everywhere that has a port. But the ceramics is something I did all my life. I started in 1990 when I left Penn. And I left medical school, I left graduate school and started over. One of the many, many times I started over. But yeah, it's
And her pieces are quite nice, I have to say. It's the first time an author has ever sent me that kind of a gift.
Oh, you're very welcome. I like all the people that are nodding that they all have my art in their houses. But the funniest thing actually was after the book got turned in so long, one of the things that I still hadn't done yet was write the acknowledgments. But this time I was a much more savvy writer, and I said, Debbie, how many words do I have? And Debbie said, 500. And I said, oh, I think I have 500 people I want to thank. So Carl said, don't thank me, I'm good. And so in the end, in the acknowledgments, I wrote something like, if I have cried at your house or on the phone with you, or you have a handmade card from me, this section's for you. Because I couldn't write all their names. I decided that could be a whole nother book. Instead of Relentless, I'm going to call my book Grateful. How's that?
I've seen everything from half a page to many pages. Do people read the acknowledgments? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, do people read books? I mean, the book is very beautiful in paperback. There is Kindle, and there will be an audiobook. It's not recorded yet, but it's coming.
Recorded by?
Recorded by, yes, something I did not realize. One of the many things I learned about being an author is you have to audition to narrate your own memoir. Yes, you do. I had to send an audition tape, and
everybody. I've had a couple of professional actors, and even they have to submit a couple of pages. Part of it is that the audio houses generally prefer to use professional narrators, in part because it's actually it's hard. And with a professional narrator, they know how to do it. There'll be less studio time. There'll be less editing at the end. Because I had an author once who insisted, and the audio house agreed, and the author had not explained that they should have budgeted twice as much time because he was dyslexic. So it was very challenging, and in a way that was one of his. He was insistent. No, I want to be able to do this. But they, we like to think that a book will have no mistakes, but of course there are inevitably some typos. But the audio houses, it's expensive. You've got studio time, you're producing it, and so they generally prefer professional narrators. So what I tell authors is you can submit an audition, there's no guarantee. And then sometimes if someone's extraordinarily busy, I'll say, look, think about it. Do you want to spend up to a week recording this, or can I ask them to submit the names of the proposed narrators they're going to use? And it's sometimes authors are perfectly happy and they'll say, yeah, and they'll actually listen to the narrator and they'll say, oh, of these 3 options, I really prefer this one, and this would be my second choice. And then some people, particularly for memoir, but also some business authors, just feel like this is my philosophy. I don't want someone else reading it. And so sometimes we've actually turned down having an audiobook because the audio company rejected the author's voice.
But you were accepted.
I am accepted, yes. And so yes, that's one of my next things. I'm going to record the audiobook. And then
Finally.
well, in a way it's fine because it gives me something else to promote. Because then I can be like, just new released audiobook. And not everybody gets an audiobook. So when I had to audition to be the narrator, I figured either way it's a win. I'm getting an audiobook for sure. And if it's me, that's nice. And if it's not me, it's still an audiobook. So, make some lemonade. I heard you have a question.
I do.
Yes.
It's super comprehensive, so answer it however you would like, but it's all around the same theme.
Okay.
So I'm getting the sense that this is really tapping into something, how well it's selling, all the press you're getting. Like, what are you hearing and or feeling that you're tapping into that's like resonating with buyers and viewers, and like how are you explaining that when you pitch yourself for an interview? And this is a little unrelated, but if you want to answer it, like how have you, so doing all of these things like increased your confidence in yourself, how has having the book out and going and speaking in front of all these people and doing this tour, how is that impacting your confidence?
Okay, so I think from the pitching part that, particularly on TV, like I was on the Daily Blast Live, so the Facebook watch of the Daily Blast Live has been watched 55,000 times. So I do think that speaks to Debbie's comment about just because people watch it and say they're going to buy it doesn't make it true. But one of the things they really focused on and has come up for TV is how can people feel more confident and try new things. And so the thing, I think, in the early part of COVID, I was home 400 days. I've never been in one place for so long. And I ended up doing a talk for the scuba show called something like getting off the COVID rust or something like that. It was like how to get back out there, but with scuba diving. That, people that were introverts seemed pretty happy. They could stay home. And people that were extroverts, like me, were like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. I need a padded cell soon. But everybody lost some of their social skills about being around people and going out and doing stuff. And I think that's part of what's resonating with people is that, we all go through, if you're lucky and you live, then you have challenges, right? And during COVID, we saw terrible things. People were in the hospital and no one could visit them, or people had family members that died and they couldn't go to the funeral, and we couldn't have a memorial when we wanted to have one. There were a lot of challenges, and I think that hit everybody. That, working in the cruise industry for so long, I worked on board for September 11th. My company went bankrupt within 7 days of September 11th. And so for me, I lost my job. I didn't lose my life. Some people, I was in New York and on September 11th, and people from my sister's building were at work and died. So it was very clear that it was an inconvenience that I lost my job, and the travel industry was devastated. And honestly, with COVID, I thought there was going to also just be not so long. I'm clearly not a fortune teller, but I think all of that is that we've all become. When I worked on the cruise ship, we knew bad things happened, right? Like I knew how many people died, and I knew when we had a fire. Like I was part of the internal team, but most people are like, I'll be fine. People ask me, should I get travel insurance? Yes, get travel insurance. Things happen. Like we had someone's luggage fall in the water when they were bringing it on board. Like, you think it's bad when the luggage, the luggage misses your flight and it comes on a second flight. What about when your luggage is underwater? That's not a happy day. But, or people are like, oh, nothing bad can happen to me. I'm in a cruise. I'm like, who told you that? People get a broken bone or bad things can happen. And I think that's what resonates with people. One of the things that Chip said to me first, and my agent Chip said, was there's a lot of books about travel. But mostly what happens is inconveniences. People miss their flight. They're not that happy, whatever, something. He's like, your book's not about inconveniences. Your book's about problems and traumas. But, like Anne said and like Debbie said, it's a little bit funny. So, and as far as me being confident, it's helped me a lot. I really have enjoyed, for me, one of the things I got out of this book is I have a byline in travel and leisure. And as a travel journalist, that's pretty much like winning an Oscar. Like it's not that easy. And one of my friends who's a career publicist, she's, I think, maybe 40 or more years she's a publicist. She called me when the article came out in Travel and Leisure and she said, who do you know? What do you mean, who do I know? She said, they don't do articles like this. Like, it's an article about me and my travels. Like, they do articles like this hotel had a renovation. So I've been fortunate to have really long connections. I have a lot of friends. I'm nice. I used to tell my students when I was teaching that it's more important to be kind than to be smart. It's better to be both. But if you have to pick, don't leave someone out of your group. And I think that helped me with the publicity. Like, for sure it helped that I'm very tenacious and I've written and I don't give up. But that's why my second book's called Relentless. But it has helped me. It's been good. But I do think that a lot of people, certainly about leaving a marriage, I know for myself and for other people it's a hard choice, or even just leaving any relationship, or leaving a job, or leaving a difficult boss, or moving across town or to another country. I mean, in the beginning of my book I say that I was living in Crazy Town. I was hoping for an upgrade to Sucksville. It didn't occur to me I could wish for a better town than Sucksville. But Sucksville seemed like a big upgrade from Crazy Town. But I think a lot of people feel that way. It's hard. So, does that answer your question? Okay, good.
Anyone else?
More questions from California?
I'll ask you, what was your toughest challenge?
My toughest challenge?
What was the one that you felt you were like, besides obviously you said the mountain biking, but what else was it like, I'm not going to do it, or you didn't think you could do it and then you just decided and did it?
I mean, in fairness, a lot of the things I rejected, but for sure the mountain biking I thought was the hardest. What else was super hard for me? I think someone was just feeling like it was gonna work out. Like even the one that I randomly read about my art. My mom was like, why can't your art be there? They don't want my art. She was like, what if they do? I think the hardest part of every single challenge was getting out of my own way. That no matter what it was, no matter who offered to help me, no matter whether we were snowmobiling or doing art or mountain biking or scuba diving, scuba diving is different, but basically my first thing was always like, no. And I, in fact, had someone offer me not once, almost every time, a PR person would invite me somewhere. And they'd be like, hey, what about this idea? And I'm like, not doing that. That's a terrible idea. It sounds scary. And then say, it sounds like that's the point of your project. I was like, do not use my words against me. That is not okay. Like, it does really seem like the point is to try things that might be challenging. And I was like, I really don't like you anymore. So I'd say that was the hardest part, and that's the thing I noticed writing the book, and maybe not writing the book, but after the book was over, one of the things I noticed was that initial instinct was to reject. Like, I'm not good enough, it's too hard. I had so many quality excuses. And now it's like, how bad could it be? You know, like when I went, this was one I really didn't want to do. One day I was skiing in Park City. I skied with this woman, Jennifer, who's blind. And I met Patricia, who's the instructor, and it was incredible to me. Even as someone that I had trouble skiing, I had problems with my eyes, but I could see. And so I skied with her, it was amazing. I felt very inspired. And then I got in the Uber to go to Olympic Park because I was invited to go on the Olympic bobsled. And the entire ride over, it's not that far, I was like, what was I thinking? Why did I say I would do this? And I was talking to my Uber driver who turned out to be ex-military. And we pull up at Olympic Park and he looks at me and says, are you kidding me? You skied with someone blind and you're not willing to sit behind a professional driver for under a minute on a tourist attraction? I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going now.
I was gonna follow up, where do you think, since like, it sounds like your mom is very, go do this, why are you asking that? Where do you think the instinct comes? And it's not just you, from so many people, to instantly reject initially what that protective instinct comes from. And where do you think, and how do you think you finally realized, I need to stop doing that?
Well, I'd say a lot of therapy. I recommend therapy. Thank you, therapists, and friends.
Where do you think it came from, the initial, that part of you that just started? Because I think we all have at some point in our life, after going through our own trials and tribulations, you start to just say, I'm not doing that anymore, I'm not doing it. So where do you think yours came from? And where do you think obviously therapy helps?
For me, in fairness, I do think a lot of people have that, but I think you have, one of my friends is a social worker in Los Angeles, and he's always telling me these horror stories about kids and that get removed from their families, and it's so tragic. The parents are so harsh on these kids. I mean, it's literally such egregious abuse. And those kids think, I can't do anything. Someone's told them their whole life I can't do it. So I think there's a big range. I think that people have one bad boss or a horrible teacher. I'm amazed as an educator, my friends, their kids, like, what do you mean they failed math? It's the teacher's job to teach. Like, it shouldn't be allowed. Like, that's my failure, not the kid's failure. So I think some of it's from that. For me, for sure, some of it was I literally ran into things. I literally couldn't see right. And figuratively, I gave up because I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I grew up in California, and the kids were like, you can't play tetherball? Everybody can play tetherball. I was like, except me. So maybe that could have been a clue, but I think for me it was a combination of things, being in a terrible marriage and having a very explosive ending. I tell people, a white Jewish girl from Los Angeles doesn't get a traditionally published book unless she has a pretty bad story, right? You have to have a good arc. Mm-hmm. So I think that wasn't good for me, that I had been in a bad situation and my response was like, the gates are closed. But it really, for me, writing the book and doing the 50 things, I definitely changed my whole life.
Yeah, just in response to that, it just seems that, that initial kind of rejection might be a real survival strategy, and not to jump into something right away, but, because the reality from what you've written, what you've lived, is that you didn't let it stop there. You kept going. That you took a pause that I interpret as a survival thing. It was like, wait a second, am I going to do it? And then you rethought it. And the ability to rethink a decision we make to do something else is pretty powerful, I think.
Thank you.
It's yours.
That's okay. Maybe a skill I learned from you when I was here at college. You can take credit.
Have you identified any other challenges that you have yet to face?
New challenges?
Yeah.
Do you have some suggestions?
It's not yet, but I can take this on.
Okay, I'm taking suggestions. I do have a couple things I was, Somebody asked me, am I gonna do 60 things before I'm 60? And is that 10 more or 60 more? So I'm pretty sure it's 60 more. I already have a bunch of things because someone said, was writing the book on the list of 50 things, which it is not. So that takes up a lot of space on the list. There were a lot of challenges writing the book, but I'm open to new challenges.
You've got some already, but.
You know, I'm very interested in Antarctica, and you know, there's still some things. I've been dry suit scuba diving in Juneau, Alaska, and that's the last time I'm doing that cold of a dive. When you dive and it's freezing cold in Alaska, you wear a dry suit and you have 3-fingered gloves, so you could still say, okay, these fingers have friends and these fingers don't have friends. And then you have your face has like a covered like this, and you have, goggles and a mouthpiece. And I said to the guy, what about my cheeks? Well, I'm gonna be cold. And he's, once your face goes numb, you'll be fine. I looked at him, I said, that's the plan? I was like, that was a terrible idea, but I still went. Still cold from that. So maybe not, I mean, I still go skiing. That's kind of cold, but Hi.
Any like major injuries or illnesses from any of your adventures?
Fortunately, most of my injuries are internally caused by the trepidation. Like, I'm so anxious. I've been very lucky, and I'm still novid. Everyone in my family had COVID, but not me. So, yeah, I mean, I took every vaccine, but yeah, no, I thank you. It was and oddly, when I was writing the book and thinking about, you know, I had this terrible bike accident that I walked away from, and I used to cry skiing all the time, and I had a near drowning. Like, I was very upset, and all those things made me think I don't want to do that again. But I never was. I see you're recovering from something here. Hopefully quickly.
2 injuries. First one's ice skating. Well, I ice skate, but it was like over the, you know how you go back to doing things after the pandemic that you used to do? So it was my first time back. Before I did work at City Hall, I have an ice skating rink.
Yeah, it's a nice one.
But I gained weight over the time, so I'm blaming it on weight. A little heavier than I normally am on the ice. I think that's what it was. And then I injured myself again because I haven't played. So I went to slide down some dewy in the morning grass, pretty warm, and then it gets cold at night. And this leg wasn't wet as a plate in it, so my body's like, I'm gonna do a split. And it's like, no, you're not, you're gonna break your fibula. So,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah.
That sounds very ouch.
Kudos to you.
Thank you. That's why I'm a big believer in little steps. See, I would go ice skating, but I would make them give me one of those things like the kids have. Because I am willing to look foolish. I'm like, the people are like, oh, adults don't use that. I'm like, bring me the thing with the wheels. And I'm a big believer in like, take the class. Anytime someone offers me to go on anything, I'm like, yeah, but I need a class. They're like, you can stand up paddleboard. I'm like, no. For sure I can't do that. And then they're like, you don't need a class. I'm like, I need every class. But yeah, and we saw a lot of things when I worked on the cruise ship. We had a lot of medical issues and yeah. But no, we hope that you heal quickly. Yeah.
Thank you all very much.
Oh,
It's not a question, just a comment. You know, obviously I have a very personal bias for you.
thank you,
But I think
my brother.
that your story is actually, it can resonate with men as well. I think the ability to overcome things that you're afraid to do, or to rise from an adverse situation to conquer more things, I think it's very inspirational. And even if I weren't related to you, I would still really enjoy reading your book.
Thank you. Carl and I met the very, very first day of college here. Well, it was my very first day. He was a junior. He was older and wiser.
Is he still in the book? He was initially.
Carl's in the book.
Yeah, but you're still there? Okay.
We didn't leave on the end.
He's not on the floor.
Did you need a Snyder release?
Well, I did change almost everybody's name, but Carl said he could stay. Some people, it was very interesting who was allowed to stay and some we didn't ask. Some we just took out. But it's a very curious thing. And, some of it has to do with what the lawyers say, so. But I'm so honored that you're all here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.